And welcome to the Go Earn It podcast. I'm your host, Shane Sparks. This is episode 15. Special guest today, three-time All-American, two-time national champion, and the Senior Associate Athletic Director at the University of Pennsylvania. He is a Matt return machine. He is on the Mount Rushmore. Matt returns tough and gritty is what I think about with this guest, Matt Valenti. Matt, I'm looking forward to this. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm doing great, Shane. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to spend some time with you.
I know you come from a wrestling family, but give us the intro into the sport and what made it stick with you.
Sure. Intro into the sport was really family. It was my dad and my mom. My mom was one of many siblings, and her siblings all wrestled growing up. My dad also wrestled, went on to wrestle at Princeton for a period of time as well. He was actually my youth coach, and he coached my brothers and I, and he coached our youth program all the way K through 8. And also just went about it the right way. Let us learn to love the sport, didn't push us in anything too crazy, just had an absolute blast learning how to wrestle. Once we realized genetically was not going to be predisposed to playing basketball anytime soon, and had to stick with those sports where it made the most sense. Wrestling just clicked, and stuck with wrestling all the way through. I was a multi-sport athlete all the way through high school, but then started to focus in tail end of my high school career going into wrestling.
What other sports did you do, Matt?
Growing up, I played a ton of sports, but I played soccer all the way through high school as well.
So I'm assuming with that being said, you really believe in that model? I mean, playing multiple sports, not specializing. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think you can count me in the camp of multi-sport fandom. I do think there's a benefit to it. I think there's a lot of value you can learn from other sports. Obviously, with wrestling, there's a different team dynamic than there is in a sport like soccer. And I think there are things you can take away. I also think, without any kind of scientific evidence, there's probably some level of physical development that comes along with doing different sports and different motions and having to kind of test yourself in different ways. I mean, the amount of running you do in soccer is nothing like what you would do in wrestling. And, it was a good way to push yourself in a slightly different manner and, experience something in a little bit different way. And I think I drew value from soccer into my wrestling career, and I think it was a helpful thing for me.
I think it is so important for kids, regardless of sports, to develop a passion. I mean, you got to find your own path. You mentioned your dad. He was your coach, but just didn't come at you hard. Give me a couple examples of some things he did that now being a parent yourself, you've come to grow a new appreciation for.
No, I appreciate that. Honestly, I mean, I think it really just boiled down to we kept wrestling fun. And yes, we competed, and yes, we, did a decent amount of traveling as part of that competition. But we never overstepped. We always made sure we made family time. We always made sure if there were interests outside of wrestling, we'd explore those. I got one younger brother who, loved music, and he's still in a band now, and he's crushing it, playing music. Youngest one was a football player all the way up through 8th grade, loved playing football, was a heck of a football player and was doing really well. And, he encouraged all of those things. My parents encouraged all of those things. And we also made sure to make time for, family vacations and things we knew we needed to do to make sure we were developing as people beyond just in the sport of wrestling too.
In high school, you won a pair of New Jersey state titles. Mm-hmm. What do you remember from those experiences? What stands out all these years later?
Ooh, okay. So those two finals matches in particular, I will never forget because they both were doozies for me. The first one, and I actually wrestled the same guy in the finals both years. And ironically, the guy I wrestled in high school in the finals, Ed Giosa, ended up going to Drexel. So he ended up going, 2 blocks away from me in school and college. But my first title, I was up 8-1 in the third period with 10 seconds left, and he threw me on my back, and I spent the last 5 seconds fighting off my back, trying not to get pinned. 1-8-6. The next year, I meet him in the finals, and I'm so nervous about getting thrown on my back, I gave up 2 takedowns immediately in the first period, and was in a 4-2 match going in the third period, chose top and turned him twice to win a second title. So 2 very different ways of winning titles. And I appreciate your intro as being gritty, but 2 ways to kind of grind out and be gritty and finding a way to win titles.
When you look back at yourself during that time in your life, Matt, what was your mindset? I mean, how did you think? What was your approach to the sport? What are the nerves like at that point in your life?
Mm-hmm. One, that was a long time ago, so I don't know that I can specifically pinpoint anything, but, I can definitely just say that when you get in those matches, for me, it was just about living in that moment and really trying to focus in on, you know, winning second by second, winning moment by moment, trying to make sure that, you know, progressing towards a win, however that happens to be, and, you know, not trying to think ahead or reflect too much, but just trying to be as prepared as possible and make sure that, you know, you're putting your most into those, I guess back then, 6-minute matches of like, you're leaving it all on the mat when it's all said and done.
When did you know you wanted to wrestle in college?
I think in the middle of my high school career, probably between sophomore and junior year, I think I realized that one, I would be good enough to do that, but two, that was a realistic path for me. And it was an opportunity that would open doors for me too. That was something that could help set me up for the rest of my life. And, you know, it was an exciting prospect of competing at the college level, but also was starting to understand that I could do it and do it at great schools where I could have some incredible opportunities as well.
You won Fargo, correct?
I did after my senior year.
What was that like? What do you remember from that?
That was a fun experience. So going into my senior year of high school, I was not ranked. I really was under the radar. You know, I was at best a top like 30 guy at my weight. And then my senior year postseason, my high school didn't really travel outside of the state of New Jersey. I went to a small public school. So I didn't really get a whole lot of national accolades. So post graduation, my senior year, I went to senior nationals. I lost a crazy match in the finals of senior nationals to Mark Mose of St. Ed's, who ended up going to Michigan, and then went to Fargo in July after my senior year, and just had a great run there and had an absolute blast. And it was a fun experience for me. And it was the first time I think I got some attention on the national stage, and it was cool. I mean, I was part of the #1 recruiting class in the country that went to Penn that year. And I was probably the 5th best guy on paper in that class because my accolades really didn't stand out until after my senior year of high school.
Who did you beat to win Fargo?
In Fargo finals, I wrestled Justin Porter from Oklahoma. Oh, excuse me. Justin Porter of Oklahoma. Close match, and then actually ended up pinning him.
Where's the stop sign?
Probably somewhere in my parents' basement right now. They're gonna hear this and beg me to come home and get rid of it.
Why was Penn the place for you? And looking back on that recruiting process, you know, how did you handle all that?
Sure. So my recruiting process was a little bit unique. I was tiny in high school. I wrestled 112 at the time as a junior in high school. And I think a lot of college coaches saw me and thought I probably would have a hard time being big enough for college. So I didn't have a ton of interest. I really didn't get much attention. My final list of schools was down to Penn, Cornell, and Binghamton. And they were really the 3 schools that spent the most time recruiting me. Ultimately, it came down to Penn and Cornell. Penn and Cornell have had and historically have had epic battles through the years. At that point in time, Penn was consistently winning the Ivy title and beating Cornell at that point. So they had what I would argue is the best combination of wrestling and athletics in the country at that point in time. I would argue that's still the case now, but Mike and I can battle that out another time. But, you know, it was an amazing opportunity for me to be able to choose between those 2 schools. And ultimately, it came down to where I felt the most comfortable. And for me, I wanted to kind of push my own personal comfort zone and boundaries a little bit. And I grew up in rural New Jersey, as funny as that sounds, not far from Blair Academy. Moving to a city was a crazy concept. You know, but it was something that I felt like if I really wanted to grow and develop, I needed to push my own comfort level a little bit and get myself out of the comfort zone. And living in an urban setting and, you know, wrestling for a program like this was an incredible opportunity to really kind of push myself in a different way. And Coach Roger Reyna was here at the time. He was the coach that recruited me and actually coached me my first few years. And he was a huge selling point in that as well.
You had good success out of the gate. I mean, you did you All-American right out of the gate, correct? As a freshman?
I was round of 12 as a freshman, actually.
Okay. With taking the round of 12, like when you left the arena that year, you know, what did you know you had to change to get on the stand?
So I learned the hard way that you had to be really good on the mat, both top and bottom. I lost in the round of 12 because I got ridden in the second period. And then I rode the guy that I was wrestling, Tony Black from Wisconsin, actually, for 59 seconds. So he had 101 riding time and an escape, and he beat me 2-0 in the round of 12.
And
And
Tony, being a Wisconsin guy, I know Tony real well. He was a
yep.
beast on top.
Oh, he was a monster on top. He was a monster. And he was suffocating. And it forever stuck in my mind as, hey, at this level, if you want to win at this level, you got to be good at every single position, and you got to be able to figure out how you best do this going forward. And that definitely resonated. And it stuck with me throughout the next few years.
Going back to those early days in the room out of high school, going to Penn, what was it like early on?
Um, it was eye-opening for me. So I came from a pretty small public school in New Jersey. I had the opportunity to train with Blair Academy a bit, again, with some of the best guys in the country at that point in time. But walking into a room where we had the #1 recruiting class in the country, we were coming off a team that had finished top 10 at the NCAAs the year prior in 2002. I mean, the room was crazy, and it was an absolute war. And I'll never forget my first day in the room. I grabbed one of my fellow freshmen and said, "Hey, you want to get on the mat and roll around?" And we started rolling around, and he just kicked the living snot out of me for like 45 minutes. And he was one weight up from me, and I was like, what did I get myself into? Like, I thought I was going to be okay at this level, and this dude just smoked me for 45 minutes. And I realized like that competitiveness, that level of competition in the room is just going to raise the level across the board. And for me, I had to step up my game. And to some degree, when you're in a room like that, the cream has to rise or you're going to fall behind. But we all got better as a result. And it was a blast to really like grow and develop alongside these guys too.
How did you battle the self-doubt? How'd you get through it?
It won some battles, honestly. I think I won the war in the long term, but the self-doubt definitely, it crept in quite a bit. I lost more matches my freshman year of college than I lost my entire high school career. And I'd lost more matches in college in my freshman year before I got to December than I lost in my entire high school career. So I definitely distinctly remember wavering at points in time, being like, am I even that good? What does that look like? How do I get better? I'm barely beating top 20 guys in the country. How do you get better? And then things slowly started to click, and you develop and you learn. And, every once in a while you get one big win and you find your way to a little bit more self-belief, and you start to, trim some of that self-doubt, and it puts you on a better path.
When you think back, was there a victory that stands out? Anything you can pinpoint? I know it's more about the process, probably tough to go to one day, but was there that one match that maybe gave you some added confidence where it's like, okay, I'm all right. I can see the results. I can see the fruits of the labor.
Yeah. So coming back to your Wisconsin guys, I was in a dual meet my sophomore year wrestling Tom Klum from Wisconsin. Well, I'll never forget. It's one of my favorite matches of all time, favorite dual meets of all time. It's one of the best dual meets that nobody knows about and ever saw, because it actually happened during a blizzard in Philly as well. So we had no fans in the stands. It was just us in Wisconsin, basically. And it was the first year that we drew weights out of a hat. And of course, we started at 33. So the match came down to Tom and I, and we wrestled a like quadruple overtime, absolute slugfest of a match. It ended with me freaking monkey flipping him over top, putting him on his back for takedown and back points. He was ranked 3rd in the country at that point in time. I was ranked like 18th or something. But it was the first win I ever had in my career over a top 10 guy. And it was a completely insane match, but we just went absolutely ham going at it. And we won the dual meet as a team, 18-17, because I won that match. Top 10 victory for me. And it really kind of set me on a trajectory at that point of like, okay, I can do this.
Getting on the stand for the first time, 5th place in 2004. What do you recall from that tournament?
So my favorite match of that tournament, hands down, was the blood round match. So I was wrestling Luke Eustace from Iowa. He was number 2 seed in the tournament, returning national finalist. That was 2003, 2004. So Iowa was in the team race at that point in time. And if he won, they would have stayed in the team race. And Iowa and I have a bit of a checkered history in general. A little bit of a chip on my shoulder from a interaction I had with an Iowa fan after my senior year of high school. And again, absolutely crazy match, double overtime, just going back and forth, low scoring, but lots of scoring attacks. Like just neither one of us could finish. We go into ride outs, and I actually reversed them and then turned them in the next ride out to have it be a score that was not necessarily that close at the end of the day, but had a crazy match. But I was in the corner of the arena where all the Iowa fans were, and they were going absolutely nuts the entire match. And I will never forget the absolute silence coming from the corner in that match. And it was one of my favorite moments of all time, to be in a blood round, to be an All-American, to knock off an Iowa guy who's a national finalist. It was just a really fun moment for me.
Can you share the story with the Iowa fan that stood with you?
Yeah. So 2002 NCAAs, I went to go watch, and just kind of chit-chatting, waiting to go into the arena for the finals. And Iowa fan, being friendly, takes up conversation with my dad and I, and we're kind of going back and forth, and asked me how I did in my high school career. And we're kind of chatting. He's like, wow, you had a pretty good high school career. He's like, oh, where are you going to school? And I told him. And that year, Penn and Iowa wrestled twice, and the final scores of the team matches were 18-16 and 17-15. So Iowa won both, but absolute battles of the dual meets. The guy turns to me as we get to the top of an escalator, and he's like, hey, so serious question for you. And I was like, okay, what's going on? He's like, so like, are you going to transfer to a real wrestling school after a year or two? And I turned and looked at him. I was like, what? And he's like, well, like, nobody's ever heard of that school. Are you going to go to a real school after this? And I just absolutely lit him up. And it lived with me from that point on. And I'm hot-blooded Italian. I can hold a grudge with the best of them. It's nothing against any specific Iowa wrestler or any Iowa fan base in general. It's just this guy who decided, didn't know what Penn was. Most people don't, which is fine. But I was like, no, first opportunity, I'm going to make sure Iowa knows who I am and knows who Penn is. And that was my first opportunity. It was 2003, 2004 in the blood round. So there's a little bit of that chip on my shoulder. Feels a little fulfilled that not only did I knock off an Iowa guy, but also crush their title hopes too.
That year, you take fifth place. I've always thought, Matt, winning national titles is awesome. That's the ultimate goal. But I'm always impressed with, getting that next best thing, winning third, winning fifth. I think there's so much honor in coming back and getting the next best thing. What do you recall from getting fifth place and finishing on top, getting that next best thing and finishing the season with a W?
Yeah. So I finished that tournament 7-2 because I lost in a pigtail first round. I got upset first round as a 3 seed by Mark
You
McKnight
lost in the first round as a 3 seed. I did not know that.
In a pigtail first round.
Matt, take us. Time out. Now, man, that just is hard for me to comprehend. I mean, I guess the easy question is the emotions, the disappointment, and how do you get back on track? Because that all sounds good. Like, just get back on track and go to the next bit. I mean, that all sounds great. But the reality is that is a heavy, heavy lift. Describe that for us.
Yeah. Jarring is the best way to put it, if I had to sum it up. True freshman Mark McKnight from Buffalo, rideouts, lost on riding time. I think it was like 4 or 5 seconds riding time difference. I absolutely froze up and shut down offensively, didn't even try to score. I was like totally just clenched up. Obviously the place is going absolutely bonkers when the 3 seeds get knocked off by a true freshman in a pigtail match. And, it was a brutal experience, and it was really painful, and walk off the mat and be like, how the heck did I just let that happen? And that was my second straight NCAA championship where I lost in the first round too. And then turn around, and actually my first round wrestleback match was a pigtail match, wrestleback pigtail against Tanner Gardner of Stanford, who went on to be a multiple-time All-American. We had a 4-round overtime match as well. So I had back-to-back, just 11, 13, however long minute matches those were at that point in time. And it was just a moment of like, man, I'm going to have to earn this if I'm going to do this. So to be able to wrestle all the way through the tournament after losing first round like that and to finish out fifth was a wild ride for me. It was a crazy experience, but honestly, it was a formative experience for me that set the tone for the next 2 years of like, if I can do that, that's way harder than winning a national title. And in hindsight, I can tell you that definitively, that losing first round and trying to wrestle back to being an All-American round, you can do that. You can turn around and win an NCAA title for sure.
How were you able to do it, Matt? Like, when you really peel the onion back, like, how could you do it?
So after my second match where I wrestled Tanner Gardner from Stanford, I walked off the mat and Coach Rain actually grabbed me and he was like, "You need to stop." And I was like, "I need to stop what?" And he's like, "You need to stop holding back." He's like, you gotta let go. You got nothing to lose." And that really hit home for me in that moment. And I think the rest of the tournament, I just was like, okay, shackles are off. Like, we're just going to let it fly. And the score is going back and looking at it. I mean, I won like a 15-11 match at one point. I won one that was like 9-7. It was just scores all over the place. And I just stopped trying to clam up and, make everything perfect and decided to just kind of let loose and let it happen. And when I did, good things started to happen. And I think that was a good lesson for me at that point in time, was like, sometimes you just got to take the shackles off and let it go.
I'm going off of just doing some research on you, Matt, before this. Are you involved right now in like some mental health, on the mental health side of things as part of your job?
Yeah, so I oversee a couple of areas here at Penn at the moment. One of which is a recent development. We hired a true mental health professional for Penn athletics for our athletes. So I got to hire an athletic psychologist 2 years ago now. She reports to me. We're working on building out the area to try and really kind of fortify our mental health support for our student athletes. And I think we've learned over time that like it's such an integral, important part of a student athlete's experience is to be able to take care of their own mental health. And it's impossible to be good at your sport if you can't be in a good place mentally. And this is even beyond sports psychology, which is a huge piece of the puzzle too. But your own mental health is incredibly important, and it's amazing how many student athletes out there struggle with it and don't realize it or don't want to realize it. But the key to unlocking your best potential is making sure you're taking care of yourself.
How would you have described your mental health those first couple years in college?
I don't think I understood what it was at that point in time in general, but reflecting back on that and some of the experiences that I had, I mean, I was a struggling young college athlete for sure. And, I probably was not in a place where I had any kind of diagnosable severe mental health disorder of any kind, but definitely at moments we're struggling with, significant levels of stress and potentially depression. And, when you lose, like you lose after putting so much time into so many efforts, like it's brutal and it takes a toll on you. Um, but I think I was fortunate that I have a lot of support around me, both at Penn at the time, but with my family and kind of all the people that I had in my sphere that really helped lift me back up. But not everybody has that. And I was lucky to have that. And I think that helped keep me in a better place and put me on a better track. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge.
I am fascinated by mindset, mental health, like all these things. I just think they're so interesting. I just don't have the knowledge on it. And I know
Mm-hmm.
this could be part of a podcast that lasts a year straight if we really wanted to go
Mm-hmm.
that deep into it. But on the surface, Matt, and your dealings on the mental health side of things, what's something that you've learned in your role? And I guess I would ask you, what kind of fascinates you about this space?
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed learning about this space and learning how I can help support student athletes in this space. Um, and one of the most important things I think I've been taught through all of this is like it is very much okay to not be okay. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of student athletes, particularly wrestlers, to come to terms with. Like there are a lot of people who are struggling, and that's okay. That's part of life. And it's going to happen at some point in your life where something hard is going to hit you, and it's going to hit you in a different way than you've ever been used to. And that's okay. That's actually normal. And for student athletes, I think the default is often, well, I'm going to tough it out. I can suck it up. It'll be fine. I can push through this. And in reality, you just make it worse if you don't take care of it. So you really need to make sure you're stepping up and taking care of yourself. Um, but there's a stigma with athletes in particular that like, I can do this. I'll be able to figure this out on my own. I can tough it out. Wrestlers are like, yeah, we're used to the pain. We can push through the pain. And you don't have to. You really don't have to. You can get help. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting help. And a huge credit to our athletic psychologist here. She's working really hard to break that stigma down. And we're starting to see it in pockets. We haven't seen it wholesale, but we're starting to see it in pockets. And it's incredibly inspiring to see some of our student athletes speak up and speak out and share some of their experiences and embolden others to take care of themselves in ways that they hadn't thought about taking care of themselves before. And I think we're all better for it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You win a national title, you get to the top of the podium. When you look back on that journey, what was the most critical in getting to the top?
So I'm going to press pause real quick. I don't know if you can hear the screaming.
Oh, that's okay. No problem.
I'm going to go get this little one. I'll be right back.
No problem.
All right. Thanks. Sure.
Was just asking you, Matt, about getting to the top of the podium. What was most critical? Because winning a national title is so difficult. I mean, I don't think people understand how hard it is to win a Division I national title. I mean, I've always said you guys are unicorns, the guys that can do that. You know, what are some things maybe that were a little bit under the radar that might not just pop as like, oh, yeah, we did, you know, maybe some of the smaller details.
Sure. I'll tell you, one of the things that really helped me get over the hump to understand that it would even be capable was, and you brought this up earlier, is kind of the mindset piece and what that means and what that looks like. And for me, there was an aha moment for me in the year that I was actually off of school. I drove out to St. Louis to go watch the NCAA championships. And now current Princeton head coach Joe Dubuque at the time won an NCAA title, his first NCAA title out there. We'd actually wrestled the year prior at the NCAA championships, the year that I took fifth. He placed in the same weight class. And to see him win an NCAA title, I was like, wow, okay, well, I wrestled him and I beat him. Like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I'll never forget, Coach Roger Rayner was sitting next to me and he heard me say that. And he was like, if he could do it, you can do it. And he's like, so you're going to do it? I was like, yeah, I think I can. And he's like, then you won't. And I was like, sorry, what? And he's like, if you think you can, you won't. He's like, until you believe you can, you won't. And that like really hit home for me. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that and, you know, really kind of letting myself embrace that thought process of like, if I don't believe that I'm going to win an NCAA title, how am I ever going to win an NCAA title? Because all that does is open a window for doubt to creep in. And when doubt creeps in, all kinds of bad things can happen. And that going into my, what would be my junior year and being able to then, you know, compete at a high level and kind of climb the rankings. You know, fun fact, I never went into the NCAA tournament as #1 seed ever. And despite that, it never shook my confidence or my belief in myself that I would do it. And it was just one of those things that like, I came to terms with the fact that like I had to wrestle my best for 5 matches at the NCAA championships if I wanted to win an NCAA title. It really didn't matter that much what happened in this during the season prior. If I won and went undefeated, you know, no matter what that looked like, when I got to the NCAA championships, if I believed I was going to do it and I had faith in the work that I put in and could lean on the work that I put in, like I could do it and I was going to do it. And that was the biggest thing for me, that going into those last 2 years, I just knew that like I had that belief that I was going to find a way. And it may be ugly and it may not be pretty wrestling, but like I was going to find a way and it didn't matter what it looked like. I was going to do it no matter what. And that I think was what kind of like flipped it for me of like, I can do this to I'm going to do this.
Where did your mentality develop being on top?
Started in high school. My club coach, Ernie Monaco at the Edge School of Wrestling in New Jersey, you know, we spent a lot of time, honestly, in wrestling philosophy and thinking about the sport and thinking about how to approach the sport. He was a big believer in being good in all positions and making sure that you were well-rounded and could compete everywhere at all times. So I think it started there. Some of the beliefs started my senior year of high school when I chose top in the state finals, down 4-2 to win a second state title. But honestly, it's just one of those things that like I hated conceding points and I never wanted to concede points ever in any position. And I kind of took the mindset of like, why the heck would I ever let somebody out? Like, you don't just get a free point. Why do you like think you just get a point? Like, fine, if you earn it and you actually get away, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not going to give it to you. Like, you go earn it. And if you don't want to earn it, then I'm going to smother you into the mat and make you pay for it. And hopefully I'm going to turn you at some point. And a lot of guys I did turn, but you know, the NCAA tournament, a little bit tougher to turn guys. And so, you know, take a lot of steam out of them, suck the wind out of them, beat them up a few times and let them know, like, you're not earning anything from me. It's a great mindset to have too.
What are the 2 or 3 most critical things, Matt, on a good mat return?
So, I would say the two things that are interesting that they go hand in hand. One, there's just a toughness and grittiness to it of like you're gonna have to work for it no matter what you do. Um, they're rarely perfect. They rarely ever happen just like you practice them. Technically, they're not like the most technically savvy thing out there. At the same time, there's technique to it too. And if you don't have solid technique, it's going to be impossible to do it. So you have to take some level of technique and some level of grittiness and kind of mash them together and find a way to just make those two things work for you. Um, it's like one of my favorite things to do because it's the imperfect technique that's best. And it's a little bit of testament of will type thing.
When you were on top of the podium, do you remember, getting the chart, standing on top of the podium? I mean, what, you remember that?
Funny, I actually did an interview maybe a week after the NCAA championships my senior year, and they put me on the spot and they're like, walk us through how that match went. And I like froze in the interview and I was like, I don't remember anything. I honestly couldn't tell you what happened. Now, hindsight, I've been able to go back and watch those matches and I can tell you what happened. But in the immediate aftermath, in a day and age where we didn't have videos like immediately, um, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I just was in the zone. I was just going, and I knew I was going to do whatever it took to win in those moments, and that's how it went.
When you won that first title, Matt, you had a hurt shoulder.
Not the first title, first All American. When I placed fifth, I had a hurt shoulder.
Okay, so when you take fifth, I'm just trying to recollect all this again. You take fifth, you're the 3 seed, right? You're the 3 seed to get beat in the pigtail match. You got to win 7 matches. Your shoulder's hurt. I mean, that's an incredible feat. Again, to deal with that, I mean, it wasn't like your shoulder hurt. You had an injury. You had an injury that basically knocked you out the next season.
Yep.
I mean, talk about, and maybe you've described this already, but I mean, would you say, I mean, this sport, obviously, it's tough. No matter how good you are, there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be battles. What would you say was your go earn it moment in this sport?
It's a great question. Honestly, it was the first round of the NCAA championships my junior year. So at that point, I'd wrestled at 2 NCAA championships. I lost in the first round both times. I was the 6th seed at the NCAA championships in 2006 and go step out on the mat and I immediately get inside trip and almost to my back, give up a takedown. And I fought out of a bad position, get back to my base. And I distinctly remember looking up at my coach at the time and smiling. And honestly, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me was giving up the first takedown of the tournament in the first match because it almost got the monkey off my back of like, okay, good. I'm glad I got this out of the way now. Now we can go to town. And I ended up like being up by 9 or 10 when I pinned the guy in the first round. But like, it was a moment of like, okay, yeah, it's not going to be perfect and that's fine. Like you're going to find your way through this. And here we go. Now it's go time. So, I will never forget it. Like inside tripped, I was like, I'm about to get pinned right now as I'm getting inside trip to my back and got out, took him right down, turned him 3 times, pinned him. But like, that was the aha moment of like, okay, yep, it's go time now.
What changed after winning a national title? Anything changed? Obviously, you repeat the next year. You beat Chris Flieger to win your first title, correct? And then you beat Coleman Scott to win your second title from Oklahoma State. Anything change after having that bullseye in your back, being the national champ?
Yeah, I think I mean, the thing that changed the most for me was just that I went from flying under the radar a little bit in my junior year to having more of a target in my senior year. But the target impacted me more so from the standpoint of like guys wrestled me differently and I had to try and adjust. And I think when I was not a no name, but under the radar name, guys were more likely to open up and just kind of let loose and try and wrestle me. And that's when I was able to wrestle at my best offensively. Senior year, particularly the NCAA tournament, I felt like I was battling to try and find any opening just because guys were like, all right, we're going to try and pick our moments and see if we can, sneak one here or there. And that was how I felt like I got wrestled against in that tournament. Now, the other side of that is I didn't give up off a single offensive point until the NCAA finals when Coleman took me down. And so like it was a different approach in the sense of like I was having a harder time scoring offensive points, but at the same time, nobody was scoring on me. And I knew if you can't score on me, then you're not going to win because you can't get off bottom and I'm going to get off bottom and then I'm going to force you into a bad spot. So, it was one of those things where like the style changed a bit because it had to, and I had to adjust. But in terms of mental approach and how things were going, it really didn't change all that much.
Looking back almost a couple of decades, hard to believe. When you look back on that, or what are you most proud of? Like when your perspective's different, obviously, as you've grown older. When you look back on that, what are you most proud of in putting two championship runs together?
Honestly, the fact that I was able to put two together, I think I'm most proud of. And I think we have so many incredible wrestlers in the sport right now. I mean, these Penn State guys and this lineup that they're putting together and the product that they're putting on the mat. I mean, these guys are exceptional, and this is going to go down as one of the greatest eras in the history of the sport, and the incredible talents that they're bringing through. But that's also not the norm. And I think we've normalized that a little bit because these guys are winning 3, 4, 5, 10. I don't know how many titles we can win these days, but these guys are putting these strings together. That's also not common. That's not normal. And there's a reason why there's only been so many 3-time and so many 4-time NCAA champions. It's really stinking hard to do. And these guys, everybody at this level is really good. I mean, look at 125 this year. Like, we need to do a Powerball draw to see who's
30
going to be
guys
seated
can win it.
where.
30 guys. I mean, honestly, this could
Yeah.
be I am so curious to see who wins 125. I think 125 is interesting because I think there's a lot of guys that can win a couple matches. It's who can win 5. So we'll see. I think eventually, again, who knows? Doesn't matter what I think. I think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be a shocker who wins that weight class. But again, who knows? I mean, it could be, it's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And that's, I think, part of what makes the sport so amazing too, is like at this level, the parity is wild. It's wild. And as much as I'm part of the NCAA committee, we seed 1 through 33, like we seed 1 through 33, and I'm looking at results at number 33, and I'm like, gosh, 33 could beat 1. And that wouldn't be the craziest thing. And that's wild to think about because there's not many sports you can say that about too, right? And that's part of what makes it so much fun. But that's also part of what makes winning multiple national titles just a crazy concept. And like I'm in awe of anybody who can repeat in general, and never mind do it 3 times or 4 times, because the level of consistency it takes, the level of competition it takes to do that year over year is absolutely mind blowing. And kudos to all those guys who've managed to do that through the years. It's an awesome, awesome feat.
What do you enjoy most about being on the committee?
Well, I mean, there's some great people as part of the committee, which has been a really fun experience, but being able to see kind of the inside of this and how we look at it in a little bit different way has been super fascinating. And I've been fortunate. I've sat on both the rules committee and now I'm on the NCAA championships committee, and seeing how they interact and seeing how they impact the sport. There are so many good people trying to do good things for this sport, thinking about it from so many different angles. It's easy to get caught up in like the things that are going wrong, but the amount of things that these two committees have put the time into developing to help improve this sport is really kind of mind blowing when you take a step back and think about it. And, we're about to jump into a meeting tomorrow for a whole bunch of hours to go over qualifiers and allocations for the NCAA tournament. We'll be locked in rooms together next week for 3 days to go through at-large bids and seeding. And in a society where having difficult conversations is not a particularly easy thing to do right now, we do it pretty seamlessly. And it's actually a lot of fun to be able to kind of debate and kind of battle through some of the things that that are challenging, and to know that you're going to make decisions that are really unpopular at the end of the day, but are decisions you have to make. It's a great learning experience for me as a person, but also I think it's a great thing for the sport. And I think the people who are involved are doing things the right way and trying to do it in the best interest of the sport too.
What's the biggest threat to wrestling right now from your lens?
Great question. This NCAA landscape right now is terrifying, to be honest. And I'm a little nervous about what the future will look like. If you put me on the spot and ask me where we're going, I think the Power 4-ish conferences are probably going to take football in a very different direction. And the trickle down impact of that is a little scary to think about and what that looks like. If we truly create subdivision that is solely power schools that make money, there are going to be wrestling programs that may go with that. And they're just going to be off on their own doing whatever the heck they want. And if we think Penn State's running a dynasty now, we'll wait till you see when we take the shackles off and let them do whatever the heck they want with no financial or rules or regulations of any kind. So I do think that's a scary thing right now. I think we need to continue to embrace women's wrestling. I'm super pumped that they're going to have an NCAA championships in 26. I feel fortunate that I'm part of the NCAA committee that's going to have to start thinking about how we do that well. And I think that's going to be a blast. But I think that's a big part of the future of the sport. I think the women's side of things, it is the fastest growing sport in the country right now. And I think it's got one of the highest upsides of any sport in the country. So I think we need to continue to embrace that and think about how we grow that as alongside the men's side.
You maybe somewhat answered this next question already, but if I could give you the magic wand, Matt, what's something you would change?
Oh, that's a great question. This might be a little bit of a moment in time thing, but I think we need to find a path to a dual meet championship.
Oh, yes.
I think we have to find our way there. They are, as much as I love the Division I individual championships, I'm a wrestling mat rat. I love the sport. I love all the upsets. I know all the nuanced guys from schools that nobody's ever heard of. Like I know how much time these guys put in the sport. The average fan could care less. Somebody who doesn't know wrestling, they don't care. But if you get them in a gym and let them watch a dual meet that comes down to the final weight class and it's an absolute barn burner of a final match, like it's hard not to like that from a pure entertainment and enjoyment standpoint. Sitting in a gym for 12 hours, that's a hard sell to anybody. So I think we need to find a path to a dual meet championship. I think we need to do it both on the men's side and the women's side. And I think we need to do it in tandem. But I think that is a huge step forward for the future of the sport. And it's going to cause some pain. And I think some people are going to have to make some sacrifices to get there. But I think in the best interest of wrestling long-term, we need to have a true national championship that is a dual meet championship.
Ideally keep both, Matt. I mean, have two separate events that can decide both.
I think so. We're inherently an individual sport too. So I think an individual championship makes a ton of sense. I think we'll just have to decide what is most important, the future of the sport or how we crown an individual champion.
And you're in these committees, Matt, super smart people, as you said, dedicated, trying to do the right things. I can just shoot my mouth off. But to me, I mean, in all of sports, and I know I'm connected to wrestling, so I know wrestling more than other sports. But to me, I mean, obviously, working for the Big Ten Network, I'm at these venues. I'm in Carver Hawkeye. I'm at Penn State. I'm in the Cavelli Center, Madison, Michigan State, Michigan. Like, it's not like it's one or two schools. Virginia Tech and NC State just wrestled. That's packed. You guys are doing a good job at Penn. Was just at Oklahoma State and Iowa this past weekend. I mean, 14,000 people. To me, it's like the most obvious thing there is. Like, I mean, the people love dual meets. Jim Gibbons always tells me dual meets are tribal. Like, people love to attach themselves to a team, and it's almost remarkable that we're not there yet. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And, there's a lot of resistance out there to it. And, I get it. And I can see some of the angles that others are taking as to why they don't want to approach it. And honestly, I'll be honest with you, like I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I don't know if there's a perfect solution, but I also think we need to rip the Band-Aid off and take a shot, and then we'll figure it out as we go. And I think for some reason we have this level of resistance of like, no, we've got to do it right. We're going to have one shot at this and that's it. And like, no, it's okay if we don't get it right the first time and we adjust. Like we can do that and we can figure it out. And we're a sport that has evolved through the years. And this is just a step in that evolution. And, yeah, maybe will we screw some things up along the way? Sure. 100%. Like we're going to flop on a couple of ideas, but we got to at least take a shot at it, or we're just going to let things continue to wither away. And, we didn't sell out Tulsa last year. That's not a great look. Like we got to figure out what the future looks like and how we get more people engaged and involved.
I told you this was a little bit like a wrestling match. I'm going to come at you from all angles. Getting back to you competing, what was the toughest loss of your career?
Great question.
And then let me ask you this, Matt. I'm going to follow that up with, They may be the same, they may not be.
Sure.
The toughest loss of your career, and then a loss that taught you the most. They may or may not be the same match.
Okay. So my junior year, the year that I won my first NCAA title, I had been on a great run of form, was getting confident, feeling good, got into a dual meet with Penn State and was wrestling a true freshman from Penn State, nobody ever heard of. And I was like, all right. I was like talking to my teammates. I'm like, here's what I need you to do. Here's what I need you to do. I was like, I'm going to major attack this guy. And sure enough, I go out and get beat. And I'm ranked like number 2 in the country at that point and get beat by an unranked true freshman from Penn State and just absolute choke job. And the loss in itself stunk. We still beat them. Like it was a cool dual meet for my team. But for me, it was like I was number 2 in the country at that point on a hot run of form and lost to an unranked freshman. I'm like, what am I doing? And honestly, it was a good, really good moment to bring me back to earth and keep me grounded and be like, okay, one, it's okay to take a loss. No big deal. Season's not over. Goal's still the same. Can still figure it out. But also, you got to get back to your humility and embrace being humble and fearing and respecting everybody you step on the mat with. This sport, on any given day, anybody can beat anybody. And if your mind's not right, you're going down. And that happened to me. And, you know, I lost some matches my senior year as well after I won as a junior. And I reflected back on that moment as like, okay, this is a defining moment of, you know, keep your feet on the ground, stay focused on the task at hand. Know there are going to be bumps on the road, but there just can't be a bump come March.
Do you remember the guy's name from Penn
Jake
State?
Strayer. Yep.
Good stuff.
Yeah, don't ask me who I beat along the way, but I can tell you everybody I lost to.
What is the most impactful wrestling conversation you've ever had? And you can take that in a million different ways.
Well, that's a great question. So I'm going to go back to a conversation I had with my dad back when I started the recruiting process. And I was looking at schools. And one of the schools I was looking at happened to be his alma mater. And I was considering it. I was really considering it. And I was like, you know what? You know, there's a legacy component here. Like it's meaningful. It's Princeton. It's number 1 school in the world. Like it all makes sense. And I think my dad sensed I was leaning that way because he did it. And I was leaning that way because that was the legacy. And he pulled me aside at one point and he's like, listen, if you're genuinely interested, I want you to pursue it. But he's like, you create your own path and I want you to do your own thing. And it was that moment in time where I had to take a step back and say, okay, what am I looking for? Who am I and what do I want to be? And it was a great moment for me to kind of just recenter and be like, okay, I need to live my life and figure out what my life is going to look like. And that ultimately led me to Penn. And it's a decision to this day, I'm so happy that I made and I'll never regret. And it's a program that's given me so much. And I'm proud that I continue to be a part of it, even in a little bit different way now.
What's the biggest impact Zeke Jones has had on you?
Zeke?
Zeke
is one of the most technically savvy, not technologically savvy, technically savvy coaches I've ever worked with in my life. The amount of technique that he could teach, could pick out. I mean, I definitely picked up a ton of really valuable technique over the course of my last 2 years with him. And things that I think helped me on my NCAA title runs as well. So I think Zeke is like elite level technician in the world. And, you know, what he's been able to do and, you know, at Penn when he was at Penn and his prior coaching experience, but to then go on and do it with the Olympic team when he coached the Olympic team. And now what he's doing at ASU. I mean, I'm not surprised to see it based on what his technical knowledge is.
Who would you say, Matt, is on your Mount Rushmore?
All right. So you got to start with Kale and Gable for sure. I'm probably going to date myself on some of these other ones, but Abbas was somebody who, as a little guy, I looked up to. I thought was incredible. It was so much fun to watch. One of the most talented guys I've ever seen. Then the fourth one, I'm going to probably have to pick between the 4-timers, but I think what Kyle Dake did, 4 and 4 weights, even though he's at my arch nemesis school, I got to give Kyle the nod of being that fourth one.
Matt, this has been a blast. This has been I love these podcasts because I learned things I had no idea. And every time I look at you, I'm going to be like, that's a guy that was ranked third in the country, that lost a pigtail match, came back to take fifth place, battling a shoulder injury. I mean, that to me, Matt, is courage. I mean, that's the word that stands out. But this has been awesome, and really appreciate the time. And thank you for everything you're doing in NCAA wrestling and continued success at University of Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Shane. And always a pleasure catching up with you, and appreciate the time.
We'll do it again.
All right. Sounds good.